Hello chess fans, in today's video we are going to have a look at an absolutely incredible game played in round 3 of the Chennai Masters. It's Levon Aronian playing with the white pieces against Parham Maghsoodloo, and well, these two players, they're very creative, always looking for a great fight over the board. And that's what we get to see in this game as well. So I'm very excited to present you this game. And if you do, in general, enjoy watching my videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel as well. I'm going to show you what happened in this game. Aronian opens with 1 e4. Maghsoodloo goes for c5. So it's the Sicilian defense. Knight f3, d6, bishop b5 check. And now the move knight d7, very logical move to block the check. And there's a lot of theory. It's a very flexible system. Both sides have different ways of playing. But the move chosen by Aronian is quite interesting. He goes back voluntarily with his bishop to a4. He says, okay, now you no longer can attack the bishop with tempo and then play b5. And well, after knight f6, black is attacking the pawn on e4. But white's going to castle, and probably taking the pawn on e4 is very risky, as it opens up the e-file, and white will look for ways to develop his pieces with gain of time to open up the center. So black consciously decides not to take that pawn on e4. e6, d3, defending the pawn, bishop e7. And now white played the move c4. And after castling kingside, knight c3 has been played by Aronian. So we see this typical pawn structure with pawns on e4 and c4. And if white gets a chance to go d4, well, it does look like we have this very well-known Maroczy type of structure where white is having a nice little space advantage. And that really helps that all the pieces are still on the board and black needs to look for a plan to activate these forces still. A lot of different options for both sides, as I said. And Maghsoodloo played here the move h6. Personally, I'm not sure this move is really needed. It's not really a bad move, but if possible, I would rather refrain from making any pawn moves close to my own king. Aronian goes for a3, so he's preparing here the expansion on the queen side. Knight e5, interesting move. Offering the exchange of knights, and now, of course, white can take on e5. But the double pawns on the e-file, they will not be too bad because the d-file will be opened and black has ideas clamping down on that pawn on d3. Very annoying backward pawn. So white is not going to take on e5. The knights, they stay on the board. Look what happened. b4, continuing with the aforementioned plan of expanding on the queen side, bishop d7. And because white has this little nice space advantage, white decides here to keep the bishops on the board as well. So what is going to happen? Is black ever going to take on b4 or not? Is white gonna advance or open up the b-file himself? In any case, Maghsoodloo decided here to play this move, knight fg4. So basically he's ready to swap knights and get another knight to e5. And also the bishop from e7 can be activated to f6 so that it can indirectly hit the knight on c3 and also the rook on a1. But now, interesting moment as knight e1 is played. And I think that's a pretty good move, as all of a sudden there are some coordination problems for the black knights. Especially this move f4 becomes a serious threat, attacking the knight, but also the knight on g4 will become more loose if the knight on e5 got a move. So the knight went back to f6. And you can also, of course, say that white's knight on e1 is not looking great, but that knight will come back later. Look, white played here rook b1. Intending to take on c5 and take the pawn on b7, b6. And now a very good move, b5. White is closing the queen side, and the main point is to cover the c6 square so that the knight cannot drop back to that square. And well, if you ever go f4, the knight has to go probably to g6. Maybe Maghsoodloo didn't really like having the knight on g6 because it will come under an attack by the f-pawn one more time. So here he decided to go back with the bishop to c8, so that after the move f4, the knight can go to d7. And you can see that white is gradually improving his position by grabbing more space. And look what happens with this nice space advantage. You see that white has easy moves to make to further improve his pieces. Rook comes to f3. Typical rook maneuver as the rook is heading over to the king side. Knight e8. Rook h3. There are no immediate threats, but you can feel that black is getting under very strong pressure very soon. knight to f6. You can see that black is struggling to come up with a good plan. And white knight is coming back to f3. And that's very clever to first activate a rook and then get a knight back to f3. And after bishop b7, white continues activating his other pieces. Queen e1, very good move. The queen is probably coming over to g3 very soon. Rook c8 played. To be honest, I'm not really sure what the rook is gonna do there on this closed file. Maybe not really needed at all, but let's see what happens. Queen g3, eyeing the king. The pawn on g7 is pinned. Rook takes h6 is a very strong threat as the g pawn is pinned. So therefore king h8. And now bishop d2. Very slow little move, but very helpful. Because now the rook from b1, which has done its job, can be activated as well. The knight went back to g8. If you see this for the first time, you're really thinking, what is black doing with his pieces? But he's trying to hold the pawn on h6 carefully. Rook e1. And the other knight is coming to f6. Knight to d1. Another very nice move, attempting to improve the knight, which wasn't doing much on c3. But it's on its way to a better square. Knight h7, knight e3. So the knight is getting closer to the king side. Rook c7 and knight to g4. Now the knight is looking for tactical opportunities, especially against that pawn on h6. But black is still defending his position pretty stubbornly. And well, in a way, even this move, f5, I think it was time to do something here for black. Maghsoodloo refrained from playing this move, but f5, I do quite like it, as the main point is here to try to open up the diagonal for that bishop on b7. It's a very unclear position. But instead, after knight g4, what black wanted to do is offer the exchange of knights. The knight's coming back to f6, intending to take. White doesn't want to cooperate, so the knight went back. So did Maghsoodloo, and you can see that he is happy to repeat moves if possible. But now queen f2. So slow maneuvering play by Aronian, but the tension is building up. All the pieces, it's move 27, all the pieces are still on the board, all the pawns as well. And maybe in certain cases the g pawn can be launched. So now Maghsoodloo said, okay, I'm gonna try to strike back in the center with the move d5. And how to react as white here, difficult question to answer. You may consider taking once and then get your knight into f5. It's a very typical way to build up the attack. That's one of the reasons you place your knight on e3. But Aronian said, okay, I want to close the position. It's a typical strategy when you're looking for ways to build up the attack. Try to keep the center close. It makes it much harder for the opponent to generate counterplay. And rather than opening up the position with taking on c4, the move d4 was played, attacking the knight. The bishop on b7 is coming alive as well, but here the knight is coming to g4, and the pawn on e5 is preventing the black knights from moving. So I feel that black is really stuck at this point. Rook e8 played, and now you're thinking, can white do something already? Well, Aronian is thinking differently. He feels like this bishop on c2 is no longer needed. The pawn on d3 is blocked, can no longer move. So the bishop is coming to d1. I really like that kind of approach, that before looking for a way to deliver the decisive blow, you make sure that all the pieces, they get involved. Black played a6, trying to trade off one pair of pawns. And finally on move 31, the first pair of pawns are coming off the board now. The a file is open, and therefore black is making space with his bishop so that after a rook h5, the rook can come over to a7. And you can see that finally there is this idea trying to come in either to a1 or a2 to put some pressure against white's pieces. But now things are getting very interesting. As white played here, very interesting move, knight to g5. That's the main point of placing the rook on h5. If you take that knight, white really wants to take back with the f-pawn. Your piece down, but it's very difficult to meet this idea of queen h4. And I mean, black decided not to take the knight on g5, so this all didn't happen. But let me show you one line. If that queen comes to h4, it is mate in 1 as a big threat. You may play here this move knight h6 still, as the pawn on g5 is pinned, as the queen will be hanging on h4. But here, white can take on h6, and if you take back, it's rook takes h6, and white is finally breaking through. You understand? White really wants to open up the king side now. And with the knight on g5, the big threat is to take on f7 with checkmate. So therefore, bishop f8, the bishop is guarding the pawns on g7 and h6. The rook is defending the pawn on f7. White played bishop f3, trading off that bad piece. And after bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, who knows, maybe the queen can come over to h3 very, very soon. And still, the same ideas with pawn takes knight, they're not really going to help. Black should really try to keep the h-file closed as well. Played here the move g6, attacking the rook. The rook went back to h3. And now the move queen a8. You understand Black's strategy. He wants to stop White's attacking play on the king side, offering the exchange of queens. But White says, I want to keep queens on the board. Queen f2. Keeping everything well covered, the bishop, but also the queen is on its way to h4, very likely. But for now, Black cannot really become active. It's not possible. The rook has to keep that pawn on f7 defended. And well, that's a very unpleasant task. Apparently, the best move, very nice economical defensive strategy here, is to use the other rook for that purpose, to defend the pawn, so that later the other rook can come to a2. And that means that the queen from f2 can barely move, as it will otherwise drop the bishop. So it's still not clear if White is able to break through or not. But anyway, rook e7 was not played. There followed the move h5. So now the knight looks stable. Black is attacking the other knight, but okay, the knight cannot be taken. There will be rook takes h7 with checkmate. But look what happened. Knight takes h7. So that you trade off an important defender. And what is Black going to do? He got to take that knight on h7. If you take the other knight on g4, attacking the rook, well, the rook just moves to h4. There's a deadly threat of taking the bishop. If king goes to g7, getting out of a potential discovered check, the knight drops back to g5, and rook h7 with checkmate is coming. This looks like it's game over. So back to the game. After knight takes h7, Black decided to take with the king, but here Aronian on move 40 is breaking through on the king side with fantastic move f4, f5, challenging the pawns on e6 and g6. If you do take with the g-pawn, well, that's something you're not going to survive. The pawn on h5 will be taken, the queen will come in, that's game over. But what did Aronian have in mind after the other pawn captures on f5? This was not played in the game, but it's a crucial idea. And I'm pretty sure that Aronian calculated the following line from afar. In this case, the sacrifice with rook takes h5 is incredibly strong. The rook cannot be taken because of queen takes f5. And also this bishop has come alive. Now the pawn on f4 is no longer there. And it's just leading to checkmate basically by force. There are a number of checks. You can take the pawn. If the king goes to g7, it's bishop h6 check. If the king goes back to the h-file, you take with the bishop on f8 with mate to follow. If you do take the bishop with your knight, well, then it's queen takes h6. King has to go back. And the knight is giving checkmate together with the queen. Very, very nice, impressive tactical play by White. So the pawn on f5, it simply cannot be taken. Black played here the move bishop g7. What else to do? I mean, the knight on g4 can't be taken. The h-pawn is pinned. But after bishop g7, White moves forward with the pawn coming into f6, attacking the bishop. Well, the bishop went back. It's a sad move, but what else to do? And now another very impressive idea here by Aronian, as he is sacrificing the rook on h5. Rook takes h5. It's game over. Pawn takes h5. And there's no good check, but the queen is coming in to h4 with the intention of taking the pawn on h5 with check. That pawn cannot be defended. Well, you can try king g6, but there's queen g5. The king got to go back, and well, this is leading to checkmate very soon. So that's not going to help. Black didn't play here this move king to g6. Played instead rook a1, but this counterplay is coming way too late. Queen takes h5 check. The king can't go anywhere. The squares on the g file have been taken away by the knight and also covered by white's pieces. Knight h6 played. Knight takes h6, just simply eliminating that knight. And after rook takes e1, bishop takes e1. And here Maghsoodloo felt it's time to resign. He cannot really do anything. The knight is just going to move somewhere. The pawn on f7 is hanging. If you do take on h6, you're rook up as black, but there's bishop d2 attacking the bishop on h6, which is pinned. And even the check on a1 is not going to help. King comes into f2. And whatever you're going to do, the queen is going to take on h6. So for instance, king g8, you take with the queen on h6. And thanks to the pawn on f6, mate on g7 cannot be avoided. So very impressive game. I really like this game with a lot of maneuvering, not so much opening theory at all. But here Aronian really showed his class, patiently improved his position. So I hope you really enjoyed watching this game. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Is Aronian going to win this super tournament? Hopefully we get to see many, many more exciting games from him and the other players as well. So thanks for watching. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you very soon again.